Since Cheeto Head has decided to start talking about how the United States needs to retake the Panama Canal, I thought I'd make a video about the U.S. colony in Panama. Let's get into it. Since the beginning of European colonization of North, Central, and South America, the great powers of the world have eyed the Isthmus of Panama and have seen it as having great potential, great strategic importance. Now, the isthmus is a geographic word that means small slip of land in between two bodies of water. And the Isthmus of Panama is unique because it is this very narrow strip that divides the Atlantic from the Pacific, but there's also this large series of lakes on one side of the isthmus, and then just this 50-mile strip of land between those lakes and the Pacific Ocean. And so it was seen as having so much potential because there was only this tiny bit of land and then these deep lakes that they maybe could deepen even more to get larger ships to go through. And it just seemed like somehow there must be a way to get from the ocean to these lakes and then across this narrow strip of land to the Pacific Ocean. So it just, people's imaginations, people's dreams were set alight by seeing the potential of this area, this geographic area. Fast forward to the early 1800s, people started to get really excited about canals as the next big thing in transportation technology. Canals were seen as a technological advance. It was thought that canals were going to really revolutionize transportation, and it started to actually be, logistically feasible for people to build canals. So there was a bit of a canal building craze in the early 1800s. And as a part of that, people started talking again about building a canal on the Isthmus of Panama, which at the time was a territory of the new country of Colombia. In the United States' interest in building a canal on the Isthmus of Panama started in 1849 during the California Gold Rush. Now, I live in California. I was educated in California. Those of you who weren't did not have to sit through grade 4 California history. We in California know a lot about the gold rush. It was kind of a big deal. And what happened was that in the mid-1800s, there was a lot of what they called the settlement of the West. I've talked in earlier videos about how that was colonization/genocide. Very chill. But there had been a settlement of the territory of the Western United States for a few decades. But in 1849, gold was discovered in Sutter Creek, which is just north of Sacramento in California. And this accelerated the settlement of California. This was colonization settlement on steroids. People went crazy. They had to get to California. They had to get to this gold. They had to go strike it rich. So the main thing to think about when we talk about the gold rush was the rush part. These people were in a hurry. They wanted to get to California quickly. People who didn't have much money would go by a wagon train. That was the slowest and the cheapest way to get here. But people wanted to get there fast. They wanted to get there fast, get the gold first, right? So the fastest way to get to California was by ship. But the way that you got to California by ship from the East Coast was to go around the Cape of Good Hope, which is at the southern tip of South America in what is now Argentina, in Patagonia. You go around the tip of South America, in between South America and Antarctica, and you come up the other side of South America, and then you go past Mexico, and you land on the west coast of the United States. It's a long trip. It's a very long trip. It's a lot of miles, and the seas around the Cape of Good Hope are really rough. That the ocean in between Antarctica and Patagonia is rough. There's weather, there's currents, it's unpredictable, it's dangerous. And it's also just to go around, all the way around South America is a trip of like 8,000 miles. So it adds 2 to 3 weeks to the journey. So people started looking at the Isthmus of Panama. So there was an overland route that you could take. So you could go to Panama, you could stop there, get off, take a boat down the lakes, and then walk through the jungle those 50 miles to get to the other coast. And it would be a bit faster than going by ship around the Cape of Good Hope, depending on how things went for you in the jungle, unless you got sick, unless you were somehow unable to make the journey. It could shave some time off of that trip. So Americans started talking more and more about this travel route through the Isthmus of Panama. The first country to try to build a canal in Panama was France. They had had great success building the Suez Canal between the Mediterranean and the Arabian Sea. And this was an enormous innovation. This was a huge technological success for them to build this waterway. The Suez Canal was a huge deal for, the merchants of the globe. So France was high off of this latest success building the Suez Canal, and they come down to Panama and they negotiate with the Colombian government a contract to build this canal. And it is a disaster from the start. They deeply, deeply underestimate what it's going to take to build this canal. They underestimate the volume of water in the rivers that they're trying to deepen and widen to make this canal, because they went in the dry season, and in the monsoon season it's a torrent, and they totally underestimate that. They also don't understand malaria. They don't know what causes it, and tons and tons and tons of their workforce get sick from this disease that, coming from France, they've never had before. They don't have any resistance to, and they don't know what's causing it, so they can't prevent it. So they ended up having like 20,000 employees die trying to construct the canal, and the French company just wasn't able to do it. Like, they had to abandon it because they had just hemorrhaged a bunch of money into it. All these people died, and they just weren't making any progress. So they tried a couple times to get this going, sunk a bunch of money into it, and they ended up there were government investigations, it was a hot mess. So they abandoned the project of building the canal. So the French abandoned the canal project. But in this time, we're talking around 1900, Teddy Roosevelt has just been elected president of the United States, and one of his pet projects is the Panama Canal. He really wants to get this done. He's like, if we can get this built, then we will have an enormous advantage globally. So Teddy Roosevelt goes to the Colombian government and is like, hey, I want to build this canal. And Colombia's kind of like, well, we've been here before with France and it didn't really work out. And also, we don't trust the United States. And, fair. And so they're like, yeah, we're going to pass. And TR was undeterred. And he went and talked to some of the wealthy families who lived in the territory of Panama, which is a part of Colombia at this time. He went to some of the wealthy families in Panama and said, hey, how would you guys like to have a country? And they're like, I'm listening. And TR said, okay, we will support you in a rebellion against the government of Colombia. And we will install you as the government of this new country of Panama. And in return, you will let us build this canal, and we will negotiate a profit sharing agreement with you. And the wealthy folks in Panama were like, yeah, that sounds great. So they started a rebellion against the government of Colombia, and the United States comes in with troops. Now, we never declared war against Colombia. We just came in with troops because this was sort of the beginning of the U.S.'s sort of sketchiness and run around Congress, when we just kind of go in and do military stuff and just be like, it's not a war, it's just military stuff, right? So this is the beginning of that. So we come in with troops, we, shut down the borders, and Colombia has just finished ending a civil war, which is actually the civil war that was in Encanto. I may do another video about that. But they didn't have the military strength to defend themselves, certainly not against the United States. And so they have to secede. They have to cede this territory to the new Panamanian government. watch for part 2.